What is middleware in Express.js and when to use them? Very important question. Let's understand with the help of a flow diagram. First, we already know we have a front end and here is our REST API, suppose. Now let's suppose it is created in Express, right? That we have to assume. Now the HTTP request will come from the front end, and first inside the REST API, the request will hit the middleware. Okay. Now remember one thing, middleware is nothing special, but it's a function only. Now you may ask one question, you can ask like when middlewares are function, then why are we not just calling them function? Why we are using this middleware word for them? See, callbacks, constructors, middlewares, all these are functions only. Okay. But because they do a specific kind of job, a specific kind of functions they are, therefore we assigned them a different name to them so that they can be identified in a very clear way. Okay, so for example, here middleware function act as a middleman between the request and the application endpoints, the get, put, post, okay, endpoints. So it's acting as a middleware. Okay, clear? Alright, now this middleware or function will perform some logic inside it. Here with the request, it will perform the logic, and then by using the next method, it will pass the HTTP request to the next middleware. Okay, then this second middleware will also execute the code inside it and pass it to the next middleware. And after executing all the middlewares only, then only the request will reach to the application endpoints like get, post, put, delete. And then the HTTP response will be sent back to the client. So now you can imagine how the request is being processed by the different middlewares. And if you notice, these middlewares are like very common functionality for which a developer has to write the code in, I think, almost all application. So basically, whenever a request will come, you will log the request details, then you will authenticate or validate the request, and then you will do some codes for security. So these are very common functionalities in every application. These are not business logic. It is for security, validation, all these purpose. Okay. And yes, I will explain them in detail in upcoming question. Okay. So one more thing here. Together, all these middlewares are also called request pipeline because all requests are coming from the front end and have to pass through this pipeline, and then they will reach the methods, the business, the get, post, real methods. Great. That is the whole story of the middleware. And here is a very easy to understand but the complete definition of the middleware. A middleware in Express is a function that handles HTTP request, performs some operations on that request, and passes the control to the next middleware. Alright, now in upcoming questions, we will explore the middleware implementation. How to implement middleware in Express? See, there are 4 simple steps for creating and using middleware in Express. Okay, let me show you. First, initialize an Express application like this, you already know. Second, define a middleware function, my middleware, like this. Name can be anything. As you can see, this middleware function accepts 3 parameters: request, response, and next is a callback function. I will explain you. So this means after receiving the request, the inside logic of the middleware will be executed, and then the next function that is received as the parameter will be called. Okay, now listen carefully. This next function is responsible for calling the next middleware function. Okay, alright, until now we have just defined the middleware here, same like a function. Okay, but we have not yet called it, right? So to execute or call the middleware function, we can use the use method of the Express application server and there pass the above middleware name as an argument. Okay, so now when request will see this code, then the above defined middleware will be executed, and after that, as usual, we can use the listen method of the application server so that our server can listen to the request from the UI or somewhere else. That's it. Now if you open the browser and with this URL, then you will see the response. Because when app.use is executed here in code, the middleware code will be executed, and from there this response.send will send this as response. Okay, clear? Got it? Great. That is how a very simple middleware is first defined and then executed by using the app.use method. And all the steps I have written here for later reference so that there will not be any confusion, although I have explained all these 4 steps already. What is the purpose of the app.use function in Express? Very short question, but very important one, and you already know the 90% of the answer. I like this. After creating or defining the middleware, the app.use method of application server is used to execute the middleware globally. Remember, globally, and for all requests. Remember, for all requests. Okay, the same thing is written here. Globally, you understand, use method will execute this middleware for all kinds of requests, like request method like get, put, post, delete, all methods. So that's why we are calling it globally. Now yes, there are other methods also apart from app.use which can only specific methods they will execute, and they will not, then the middleware will be executed will only with a specific kind of methods, not with others, and that I will explain you in upcoming questions. Okay, but now you completely know what is app.use. What is the purpose of the next parameter in Express.js? Again, I think you know 70% of the answer, but now let's make it 100% because this is very important. We know how to define the middleware like this, right? Now our question is what this next parameter or next function is doing here. Because we are receiving this function as the parameter above, therefore it's a callback function. Okay, I hope you know callback function. When we receive any function as the parameter, that is the callback function. Now remember, in most applications we have more than one middleware. Okay, so for example here we have this another middleware defined like this. Then first we will execute the first middleware by using this method. Now when this middleware execution is completed, after that, in order to send the execution to the next middleware, we will call the next function at the end of the first middleware. Okay, and therefore then only this next middleware will be executed. Otherwise, if you will not use this next function, then next middleware will never be executed. So that then we will of course start the server, and finally we will get the output like this. And here you can see interview from the first middleware and happy is from the second middleware. And also that is the explanation, and here is also I have written the answer and the simplest definition of the next callback function. The next parameter is a callback function which is used to pass control to the next middleware function in the stack. Okay, and again this next function is a inbuilt function present in the Express framework. So that's why we use Express framework. Okay, it provides so many things that even we sometimes don't know how many things like it has providing to us. Great, that's the answer to this question. How to use middleware globally for a specific route. Now let me explain with the help of the code. Here how we define the middleware, you know. Now our requirement is that we want to execute the middleware only for a specific kind of URL, like this middleware. Okay, for that we can use this app.use method only. Okay, but this time as a first argument we will pass the specific URL, and then in the second argument we will pass the middleware name. So what it means? It means This middleware will only executed if the request URL will contain this string. That's the purpose. Finally, we will start listening to the request, and then if you will open the browser, here if you pass the URL with this example string in it, okay, then only you will be able to see the middleware result. If you remove the example string from the URL, then middleware will not execute, and therefore you will not see anything here in the browser in that case. Okay, so that's the answer to this question, and same is written here for later reference purpose. What is the request pipeline in Express? Here you remember the middleware execution inside the REST API, right? You remember. As you can see, this request is passing through each middleware and finally reaching the application endpoints. So all these middleware execution are one by one and together, and therefore they are called a request pipeline also sometimes. Okay, so because it's like a pipe, okay, because from which the request will pass, right? Great. Here I have also written a very simple definition. The request pipeline is Express is a series of middleware functions that handle HTTP request, incoming HTTP request, and pass the control to the next function. That's the answer to the question.